So we have some tools to help the children in their developing responsibility, things that are going to support that capacity as it emerges within them. And one of the tools we have is called the work journal, or some people call it a learning journal or a work record. But this work journal is for the children to help them in their responsibility. It's a tool for them and for that internal capacity that we're nurturing. It's not a tool for us to sort of torture them or oppress them in some way, but it is really to help them in their developing awareness of responsibility. So this journal, at its most basic, is a record of the work a child has done in a given day and the amount of time the child has spent on that work. So they have a date at the top of a page and the time they start a work, and then perhaps the time they end it or the time the next work starts. And at this really sort of basic level, what we want the children to be able to see is how they've used their time in a given day and how long it takes them to do particular works, or what happens when they don't work or sort of waste time. All of these awarenesses, we just want the children to experience. We aren't forcing a certain level of responsibility on them, but we simply want them to have a tool that helps them learn how to manage themselves. So for the youngest children who first enter your classroom, or any child new to the environment, remember they don't have a lot of freedom because they don't have a lot of knowledge, because they haven't had lessons in the classroom yet. So because they aren't exercising that capacity for freedom, we also don't need them to exercise the same capacity for responsibility yet. They are likely spending most of their time with the adult, getting frequent lessons to connect them to the environment to boost their freedom. So they don't necessarily, at the beginning of their experience in the elementary, have to keep a work journal. However, they may have some interest in this, or you may start to ease this into their work. So you may have them track their work even just on a single piece of paper, and they can then collect several days worth together into a booklet. For younger children, you may need to print handwriting paper with room for the date and room for clocks for the time even. So if they can't tell time, they can draw in the clock hands. But as the children get older, we're going to encourage them to provide more detail about what they've been doing. So perhaps instead of simply writing the name of the material they're using, which is, what a child would do when they're first writing in their journals, they could write, I did the checkerboard, I completed 5 problems, I worked with, Ishmael and Johnny, whatever sort of, greater depth they could provide to what they've done. And ultimately, what tends to emerge in a lot of children is that the work journal becomes a place where they do some reflection on their work. Like, wow, I really feel like I've accomplished or mastered this, or I need to do some more practice tomorrow. Some of this kind of conversation or reflection starts to emerge in their journals, which is a fantastic tool for them as they're thinking about being responsible for their own learning and their own work. So we have to remember it is a tool for the children to support their responsibility, not a tool for us to, persecute them with or make them feel like we're checking up on them all the time, although we will check this. But it is their tool. And if we're finding that a child is struggling with it, I've had children that really resented the work journal at various times in their experience. We need to think of creative solutions to that. We aren't just going to impose it on everyone, even if it's not working for an individual child. So we have to go back and think, what's the goal of the journal? To help the child recognize how they work, how long it takes them to work, some of their work habits, and to take responsibility for that. So if the journal isn't an effective tool, what is something else we could do that will accomplish that goal? Can a child draw that? or create mind maps of it? Or is there a different way that this child can accomplish that goal without me having to force them to do something they don't want to do? So these are things to think about as we're providing this important tool for children, but also being very responsive to individual needs. Most children handle the journal really well, but some struggle. And so then we have to be creative, like we are in everything that we do. So the work journal, an important tool for the children to become responsible for their work and their own learning, and a tool that we'll use alongside the other tools that we're going to discuss, the individual meeting with children and the state or national standards.